Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Agriland journalists Breifne O'Brien and Maitiú Monaghan and Agriland beef specialist Breifne O'Brien. Well, there's a lot to get to this week, and we'll start with you, Breifne. You had a story there in recent days on a potential setback to the calf trade. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, that's right, Charles. So on Friday, the 7th of March, Irish-based calf exporters were informed by a text from Stena Line that their boat, the Stena Horizon, would not be going on the route from Rosslare to Cherbourg and has instead been switched to a different route, with the replacement boat actually not being able to bring livestock and calves as well, for that matter, on the route from Rosslare to Cherbourg. So the move was described by Irish-based calf exporters as a major setback to the trade. Some calf exporters have told Agriland that it could reduce the capacity by as much as 25%. Now, Brittany Ferries did announce last month that they will have a ship called the Cotentin running on the Rosslare to Cherbourg route, which is a new boat and will be approved to transport calves and all livestock for that matter. But it doesn't have the same gross tonnage as the Stena Horizon boat and won't be able to bring the same capacity of livestock. So the last sailing of the Stena Horizon from Rosslare was on Tuesday, March 11th, and the first scheduled sailing after the dry dock period will be on Tuesday, April 15th. Now, some of the Irish-based calf exporters have told Agriland that they expect the duration of the boat to be out of action, could be slightly longer.
Well, we'll keep an eye, Breifne, on how that affects the trade. But in the beef sector specifically, there's better news, and that's that the prices to farmers are continuing to see new heights.
Yeah, that's right, Charles. So beef prices, look, it's one positive story after another at the moment, with prices increasing week on week. We've seen it said before by procurement staff to Agriland that, what's perceived as a good price this week is almost an average or even a poor price the following week, such as the rate of beef price increases. So normally if we've seen a 5 cent per kilo beef price rise within the space of 1 week, it would be seen as a positive step. This past number of weeks, we've been seeing 10 to 15 cent a kilo price increases and more in some cases. So it's all fairly positive on beef prices, and they are thankfully moving in a positive direction. Prices are now at record highs and never before seen levels. So this week we have 7 to 7.10 a kilo for in-spec or grade cattle this week before any breed bonuses are taken into account. Some farmers have told Agriland and factory agents as well that there are flat price deals of up to $7.50 per kilo available this week and above in some cases. And farmers can check out the Agriland app in the beef section to see the latest prices that are available.
And finally, before we let you go, Breifne, you were recently speaking to a man who, while known outside farming circles for his day job, is also a successful breeder of Angus cattle. So what were yourself and Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary talking about?
Yes, Charles. So on Friday, the 7th of March, at the Certified Irish Angus Schools competition, Agriland caught up with the Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary. So one of the questions that we asked him was, he's obviously the CEO of Ryanair, one of the largest passenger airline companies in the world. Agriland asked him if he considers himself a full-time beef farmer or does he consider himself a part-time beef farmer. To which he responded, I consider myself a full-time beef farmer and a part-time airline chief executive. O'Leary says, I only run the airline so I can put the money into the beef cattle, he told Agriland. And anyone who wants to listen to that interview can hear it on the Agriland social media channels or on the Agriland app. Look, he also commended the Certified Irish Angus Schools competition and I suppose the involvement of the students and what they gain in learning about food production and beef production in Ireland from taking part in the competition. And he also mentioned his Gigginstown Angus on-farm sale, which is set to take place on Easter Saturday, April 19th, where there would be a selection of pedigree Angus bulls and heifers on offer. So we also asked O'Leary about a few other topical issues in the beef sector, and here's what he had to say on the controversial issue of the ICBF's Eurostar breeding indices for suckler cattle.
I don't have a difficulty. I think they're a good idea, but it's the lack of consistency. When they start changing it, everybody was producing cattle with 4 or 5 stars, and then at a stroke of a pen, they changed the ratings again. So it lacks consistency, and I think if it hasn't got consistency, you undermine the credibility of the programme. I think if they're going to continue with the STAR system, they have to stop changing it and stop making these kind of arbitrary changes, which drive farmers like myself mad.
That was Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary there speaking to Breifne O'Brien. And thanks, Breifne, for your updates on that. There's just one more bit of beef news to update you on, which is that Irish exporters can now send beef produce to Thailand after Ireland gained market access to the country. The categories of beef that can be exported to Thailand include all edible parts, bone-in and boneless cuts, both fresh and frozen. Beef offal is not included. Thailand is the second largest economy in Southeast Asia after Indonesia. It has roughly 65 million people and demand for beef has been growing there recently. So another bit of good news for the beef sector. But it's not all good news. A development in the last week on the European continent, which doesn't really affect Ireland at present, should nonetheless give pause for thought for several sectors, specifically beef and dairy. Aisling, can you bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Charles, last Friday we got confirmation of an outbreak of foot and mouth disease identified by the National Laboratory in Hungary. Now, the highly contagious disease was identified on a cattle farm with 1,400 head of cattle in a village in the northwest of the country, which is actually located close to the border with both Slovakia and also with the border with Austria as well. So it's the first time this disease has actually been confirmed in Hungary in more than 50 years, and officials say that the farm saw classic symptoms of the disease at the beginning of March, and the presence of the pathogen was then confirmed by the National Laboratory. Now, the virus serotype is not yet known, Charles, and investigations are underway to determine the source of the infection here. And I suppose, as we've seen previously with Germany, the country has taken various measures, including a protection zone with a 3-kilometre radius and a surveillance zone with a 10-kilometre radius being established around the site of this outbreak, within which there are strict controls applied. The movement of susceptible animals is prohibited and checks on livestock are underway as well. There's also a 10-kilometre restriction zone in an area of Slovakia, which is closest to the outbreak in Hungary. Now, Hungary has introduced a movement restriction on all susceptible animals in that region of the country. And after that, only direct transport to slaughter will be permitted in the region up until St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. So all international movements of susceptible animals out of Hungary has been suspended until further notice as a result of the confirmation of foot and mouth disease. And we've also learned that hunting and events involving animal gatherings in the affected county are banned, and tourist attractions such as zoos and wildlife parks will also be kept closed until further notice. Now, as you said, it's not a direct cause for concern to Ireland at the moment, because we did get confirmation from the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine here that there have been no movements of animals susceptible to foot and mouth disease to Ireland from Hungary since January 1st. And the department said that actually more than covers the risk period for foot and mouth infection. And the department also confirmed that there have been no movements of foot and mouth susceptible species into Ireland from Slovakia or Austria so far this year. Now, while it's maybe not a cause for immediate concern, it does, I suppose, raise the awareness again of the risk posed by foot and mouth disease here in Ireland. And the department is running an ongoing public awareness campaign, and livestock owners in this country are being advised to implement biosecurity measures to mitigate the risk of an outbreak of the disease here. And any suspicions of foot and mouth disease have to be reported to your local regional veterinary office or the National Disease Emergency Hotline. You can find that number on our website and app. And Minister for Agriculture Martin Hayden said that the outbreaks of foot and mouth disease in Germany back in January, which we previously spoke about, and now in Hungary, highlight the ongoing risk that this disease poses to Irish farms. And he did appeal, like the department, to all farmers and those working with livestock in the country to stay vigilant, to practice good biosecurity, and to be particularly aware of the risks when returning from visits to countries where foot and mouth disease is present. Now, foot and mouth disease is one of the most contagious diseases, as I said, for animals, and the virus can be introduced into new areas through the movement of infected animals, feeding of contaminated products of animal origin to susceptible species of animals, contaminated materials coming into contact with animals, and airborne transmission over long distances as well. So, look, it is something that we have to be very conscious of, Charles. Thankfully, there doesn't doesn't seem to have been any movement from Hungary, Slovakia or Austria in recent months, which would give us cause for concern. But I suppose following on from the outbreak in Germany in January, and now we've had an outbreak in Hungary, it's just something for us all to be very much aware of.
Well, for our next item, we're going to stay on the topic of animal health. Specifically, we're going to talk about TB. Aisling, you had an interesting story this week on Ireland's TB eradication programme and the European Commission. So what did you learn?
Yes, Charles. So we're reporting this week on Agriland that the European Commission is planning to audit Ireland's bovine TB eradication programme this year. And we understand that the audit, being overseen by the Directorate General for Health and Food Safety, that's DG Sante, it will include remote meetings and on-site visits here in Ireland. Now, the schedule and the itinerary for this audit have not yet been finalised, but it is anticipated that there will be engagement between Commission officials and members of the TB Forum as well in the coming weeks. Now, this audit forms part of a wider series of controls being undertaken across EU member states. And the purpose of this is to monitor the application of EU requirements concerning surveillance and eradication of certain animal diseases as well. So following on from the completion of this audit, a final report will be published on the DG Sante website. However, we have no time frame for that publication yet, and it is expected that the EU Commission would also follow up on any recommendations that would be made in that report, which will be in accordance with standard procedures. Now, the most recent Commission audit of Ireland's TB eradication programme actually dates back over 10 years ago. It was in May 2014 that took place. And the main objective of that audit was to evaluate the implementation of and the progress made by the programme, which was co-financed and is co-financed by the EU to eradicate the disease. Now, overall, that report back in 2014 concluded that the programme was implemented and run as approved by the Commission and in compliance with the specific technical requirements of EU legislation. But they did note while the programme had made clear progress in the past 5 years, it is still uncertain whether currently applied measures are sufficient to reach herd prevalence level required for a bovine TB-free status. And the audit team at that time didn't actually consider it necessary to issue recommendations to the authorities in Ireland. And in March 2015, the department issued its response to that audit report, and it said that the current programme provides a coordinated and robust framework by which eradication of bovine TB from the country will be achieved, particularly when the badger culling strategy is supplemented as planned by a wider badger vaccination programme. And at that time, the department noted that research was ongoing into the development of an effective badger vaccination programme. And they did note that it's not to say, however, that further modifications and amendments will not be required to the programme. And they did say that in recent years, before 2015, that they had introduced various changes to the programme as well, while trying to move towards that goal of eradication. So this all comes at a very interesting time for TB in this country, Charles, because farm organisations have said that the TB eradication programme, it's not working in its current form and it has to be revised. And this has been echoed as well by the department. Last year, we heard from Brendan Gleeson, the General Secretary at the Department of Agriculture, and he said that policy on bovine TB needs a reset and that we need an honest conversation around how to halt the march of this disease. And back in 2016, we actually reached a historical low with herd incidence falling to 3.27%. By comparison, the department's figure as of February 9th shows a herd incidence rate of 6.03%. So that just shows how much in the wrong direction we've been going. And we do see that TB reactors have run to over 40,000 as well, according to the most recent figures from February 11th, 2024 to February 9th of this year. And say the corresponding period a year previous, the reactor numbers were just over 29,000. So this all comes against a total exchequer spend as well, Charles, of over €100 million in 2024 on Ireland's bovine TB eradication programme. And look, the department has been discussing, I suppose, a number of proposed measures in recent times with members of the TB Forum in a bid to, I suppose, halt and stop the spread of TB across the country. Nothing yet has been agreed. We have to stress that discussions discussions are ongoing with members of the forum. But it is understood that cattle-to-cattle transmission of the disease is being closely looked at, and possible measures could include movement restrictions being applied to herds with over 60 cows where a certain number of animals fail the skin test. They've also been focusing on the testing regime, wildlife measures, biosecurity, contract rearing and controlled finishing units as well. And the department has also asked farm organisations to submit to them their recommendations on how they feel that we can, I suppose, put this back onto the right track. And I don't know if eradication will be possible in the near future. Some people argue it may never be possible, Charles, but it's definitely going in the wrong direction at the moment. And the forum, the TB forum, is due to meet again later this month. But as I said, that audit due to take place in the coming weeks and months ahead by the European Commission, and will be very interesting to hear what their thoughts are on the current picture.
And Aisling, that wasn't the only bit of TB-related news of note this week. You have a bit more on it.
Yeah, so Tirlán has actually launched a €5 million bovine TB support programme to help their milk suppliers who are impacted by an outbreak in their herds. Now, this is going to be a voluntary programme, Charles, and it's going to provide interest-free cash flow support to those farmers who are affected by TB outbreak, and it will supplement payments which are available from the state-funded eradication programme, which we were just speaking about. Now, this programme from Tirlán will offer a simple and streamlined administration process, we're being told, and there will be no administration fee. So how it's all going to work is that it will offer farmers an optional advance on future milk payments of €750 per cow to milk suppliers that lose over 5% of their herd to a TB outbreak. Now, this prepayment will be available for herds impacted this year and in 2026, and it will be deducted from actual milk payments to the supplier in year 2 and year 3 after drawdown. So in the case of new entrants, Tirlán said that the programme will be available regardless of the number of animals impacted as well. Now, funds advanced under this programme, as I said, will be set off against actual milk payments that will be due by Tirlán to the supplier. So it is, I suppose, a very interesting move by a co-op, and Tirlán chair John Murphy said that TB outbreaks create significant financial and emotional stress for farm families. And given the challenges being experienced by a significant number of their farmers, the board of Tirlán felt it was an appropriate thing to do to offer immediate and practical support to impacted farm families. And the co-op said it's also going to engage with the Department of Agriculture and other stakeholders on how to optimise the effectiveness of the TB eradication programme. And the co-op is going to offer technical support and advice to farmers to reduce the risk. And the new support programme will open for applications later this month, we're told. So a really interesting move by Tirlán, and we'll have to see, will other co-ops follow suit as well, Charles?
Well, regular readers of Agriland will know that Bord Bia is developing a new producer standard for beef, sheep and dairy. It would be a significant development when it comes into effect. And Aisling, you got an update on it this week.
Yeah, Charles. So as you said, work has been underway on this for some time now. So the new quality assurance standard would replace the current farm standards for beef, sheep and dairy into one consolidated standard. And it's all being discussed by a specifically appointed TAC, which is Technical Advisory Committees, which continue to meet regularly as well. And a spokesperson for Bord Bia this week told us that all stakeholders, including the Irish Farmers Association, the IFA, and the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association, the ICMSA, are active in this process. Now, the draft standard for the beef, sheep and dairy audit is currently being tested with auditors for training purposes. And once those auditors have familiarised themselves with the criteria, pilot audits will be conducted on farms to road test the criteria to make sure it's practical for farmers. Now, the technical advisory committees will then review the feedback from the pilot audits to formalise a final copy of the standard for agreement. And the spokesperson for Bord Bia added that final agreement agreement on the criteria is several months away at this point. Now, it's understood that animal welfare and sustainability are both very high on the agenda in the draft standard. And we caught up with the chair of the IFA Livestock Committee, Declan Hanrahan, this week. And he told us when it comes to this new producer standard, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, Charles. He stressed that, and he said that we have to wait for the final draft and to see how the pilot audits have gone. And interestingly, the IFA Livestock Committee has actually put forward a number of farmers to take part in this pilot audit process as well. And Hanrahan said to us that the main aim for the IFA, and it has to be said probably for all of the farm organisations, is to further simplify the process for farmers before and during quality assurance audits. And Declan Hanrahan noted the stress, of course, that can be caused to farmers due to inspections. And he actually said to me that a growing number of farmers out there are actually employing planners to prepare their farm for inspections. And that, of course, involves an additional cost as well. Now, he acknowledged that Bord Bia, in his words, is vital for marketing Irish food produce, but he said it is important too, Charles, that farmers have confidence in this new standard. And he said that there has to be consistency amongst the auditors and also in how this new standard is applied. And he said it would be very important as well that farmers have control over their audit data and who has access to that information. And look, last year at the ICMSA AGM, the chief executive of Bord Bia, Jim O'Toole, told us that work is ongoing to try to streamline the process for farm audits. There's around 60,000 odd farmers part of the Bord Bia quality assurance schemes, including dairy, beef and lamb, and around 43,000 audits are conducted by Bord Bia every year. So it is, a huge part of life for a lot of farmers out there who are part of the QA schemes. So I'm sure any move to simplify that process will be welcomed by farmers. But of course, as we say on this podcast very often, the devil will be in the details. So we'll have to wait and see what comes out from the pilot audit process.
Moving on now to something entirely different. And Maitiú, you had an interesting story this week on a stretch of the N2 in counties Monaghan and Louth that requires funding but seemingly isn't getting it. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so I spoke with Fianna Fáil Senator Robbie Gallagher during the week. The Monaghan man is very concerned about a 32-kilometre stretch between Castleblaney, which is in Monaghan, and RD in County Louth. So there have been 17 fatal collisions on this road in the past 10 years and 24 in the past 18 years. In a Shannon debate, Senator Gallagher said that 17 farm buildings will have to be removed to build a dual carriageway on this stretch of road. What is frustrating the locals is that the project has stalled because it's run out of funding. According to Gallagher, Monaghan County Council has spent up to 5.5 million on the project to date. So last year, the council thought an additional 900,000 to complete phase 3 of the project, but it was rejected. And that seems to be what is causing the issues for farmers in the area. Gallagher said that not for the first time the people of Monaghan have been accommodating for the greater good and that it's insulting to the goodwill of the local community. The senator said that a further announcement about funding is coming from the Transfer to Infrastructure Ireland and it is expected in the coming weeks. And he says that it is essential that a piece of roadway is included in that funding and that in the overall scheme of things, €900,000 isn't an awful lot of money.
Thanks for that, Maitiú. And while we're on the topic of land use, I'm just going to take this opportunity to let you know about our sister podcast, Agri Focus, the latest episode of which is now available on Agriland.ie and the Agriland app. This week's Agri Focus features Vincent Roddy, the president of the Irish Natura and Hill Farmers Association, who spoke about concerns over the Good Agricultural and Environmental Conditions, or GAECs, specifically GAEC 2, which will be part of CAP conditionality this year. Here's a taster of what Roddy had to say.
Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose for farmers first, I mean, the planners won't love us for this, but when they are going to talking to the farm advisors, I think, it's important that they bring that up. They can check the maps, they can see how their land is. Now, I know the department are talking about an appeal system for farmers if, you can get that land taken out. They're also saying that if you have mineral soils, that you can split a parcel. But the problem with splitting a parcel is Well, there's two problems with that. The first one with that is that you need a feature in order to be able to split it. So in other words, you need, right, if you're two fields, that's straightforward. There's a feature there. You need a hedgerow. You could put in a fence and that creates a feature, or you need a river or something like that, or a roadway. So you do need to have a feature in order to split the parcel. The other problem though with splitting the parcel is that, and we've seen the problem with acres. I mean, you're now creating a different parcel. You're going to create two new parcels here if you're splitting, and that's going to give a complication with acres.
But finally this week, and for the weekend that's in it, we're going to end today's show by talking about shamrock farming and how it works. One place where shamrock farming goes on is in your own neck of the woods in Kerry, Aisling. So can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, Charles. Well, a very timely story to finish up for the week that's in it, with the symbol of Ireland, the shamrock, of course, on one of the most Irish times of the year. St. Patrick's Day is looming. And of course, all eyes were in the White House yesterday as Taoiseach Micheál Martin presented the traditional bowl of shamrock to US President Donald Trump. Now, politicians may come and go, Charles, on both sides of the Atlantic, but presenting that bowl of shamrock has been the constant through all of that. And of course, it does mark, I suppose, the unprecedented access that a country the size of Ireland does get to the White House for that one day of the year. But that shamrock itself has come from my part of the world, as you rightly said, from Kerry, from a shamrock grower by the name of Joe Shukru. Now, we'd say Shukru, maybe in other parts of the country they may say Sugru. But Joe Shukru spoke to our colleague Louise Hickey this week, and he has been growing shamrock for around 4 decades now in the southwest of Kerry at a site which is best known for exporting to the US and elsewhere. And it also provides shamrock domestically as well. So this shamrock is planted from seed by the local company called Irish Plants International in Ballinskelligs. And it's interestingly grown in a hydrogel. And these hydrogel pots, they were developed in conjunction with scientists from University College Dublin. So unlike maybe other places where shamrock is grown in the country, this shamrock is actually grown without soil, and therefore it can be shipped internationally. And the site supplies shamrock to the president of the US for now nearly 30 years and began operating back in 1972 with help from Údarás na Gaeltachta, and it is one of the oldest operating greenhouses in the country. Now, so part of Joe's team includes his son Cian, who helps him grow the shamrock, which is ready just in time in the 2 weeks before St. Patrick's Day. We were told it's a 6-month crop, and apparently it's easy enough to grow. It's much like clover, we were told. It does not require much maintenance, but just some tender love and care, and it can grow quite easily unless there's a very heavy frost, because that would actually kill it. But of course, it being under glass there in Ballinskelligs, that protects it from that as well. But a really interesting piece from Louise for the week that's in it, if you want to learn a little bit more about where that bowl of shamrock comes. And it played its part in a diplomatic visit of sorts this week. And I think fair play to Micheál Martin. I don't think I'd envy him being in that seat in the Oval Office. Charles, I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with Aisling. It's not for the faint-hearted, I would have said.
No, definitely not.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's podcast. Just very finally, the race to become the next president of Macra is really heating up now. This week saw the first of 6 election hustings between candidates Josephine O'Neill and Conor Murphy, and Aisling was in Adair, County Limerick for that first husting. You can check out Aisling's report on that on Agriland.ie and the Agriland app. But that's where we'll leave it. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Maitiú, Breifne and myself, a very happy St. Patrick's Day to you, and enjoy the long weekend.